Hi there, and welcome to episode 67 of B2B SaaS Marketing Snacks. I'm Brian Graff, I'm the CEO of Kalungi, and I'm here again with Kalungi's co-founder, Stijn Hendricks, who's a serial SaaS marketing executive and an ex-Microsoft product marketing leader. Today we are hopping on the AI bandwagon. It seems to be taking over almost every software solution out there and has also made us unimaginably more efficient, allowing B2B SaaS marketing teams to do so much more than they ever could have with so much less. But AI isn't a silver bullet. It, like every other technology, has limitations, and if it isn't used the right way, it can lead to vanilla, generic, or outright inaccurate responses that could stagnate your marketing performance or even hurt your brand. Hopefully this discussion helps you to use AI the right way and lets you get the most out of AI for your marketing team. Let's get into it. Okay, Stijn. Today's topic is AI's impact on marketing. And I'm sure that there are plenty of other sources talking about the same thing. It's a big topic nowadays, but I wanted to make sure that we could weigh in where we think is important. And I think that as will come about in the conversation, there's a ton of really beneficial things that AI has brought, and it has disrupted marketing much more than honestly I thought that it would when it first came out. But I still think that there are some pretty significant limitations that are worth considering as, you as a listener, as a marketer, as a, B2B SaaS founder, executive, consider utilizing it in your marketing efforts. I don't think it's a silver bullet by any means, but I think that it can add a ton of scalability to your team if used correctly. So let's see if you agree, and we can dig into it. So let's start with, your use of AI. Maybe describe what you've used it for and what are some of the main benefits that you have seen from it so far.
Yeah, it's funny. I have been working, I think, most of my career with a lot of, well, at some point I was very young too, but let's say the last 10, 15 years of my career with people that are much younger than I. But in marketing, you end up working with a lot of people in their early 20s that are either, interns, they're junior people on your team. And I had expected when ChatGPT arrived at the scene that the Gen Z generation would be mostly going to embrace it, and the millennials, and it would be far more, I guess, higher friction for Gen X, my generation, and the boomer generation kind of to adopt this new way of utilizing this amazing productivity hack, right, and tool set. And what I've been surprised to, Brian, that I think I use it more than most of the 25, 26-year-olds that I work with in marketing. And it's actually puzzling to me, honestly. I use ChatGPT for almost everything I do. Whether I prepare a meeting, whether I'm doing notes from a meeting, whether I'm preparing a plan, whether I'm reviewing something, I'm giving someone feedback, I have to come up with a presentation. I'm writing a book again, which of course is very useful to do research, to structure my thoughts, to get some ideas on the sequence of talking about certain topics, right? To make sure we don't forget anything. When I do content, creation in general, there's nothing more powerful for someone who, for who English is not the first language to make sure I don't have to worry about the spelling and the grammar and things like that. And I can really think about what is it that my audience could really benefit from, right? I could do research, again, using AI on what's already out there and challenge myself to make sure that I publish something that is increasingly better, that is not what's already out there. And so all of these examples that I just gave, I cannot fathom why an average marketing leader or marketer doesn't do the same. And the amount of marketers that I see out there that are still, especially younger ones, that are still doing a lot of these things that I just described without starting with ChatGPT first. It's amazing, Brian. And I'm sure you have a perspective on this running a relatively sizable marketing agency. But that's my first kind of, so when I coach people, I constantly, where I used to ask, hey, did you Google it? When someone asked me a question that I felt was not necessarily, a good use of our time. And Now I say, hey, did you ChatGPT it, right? Did you use it to either prepare a conversation, to get an answer to your question, to help you structure your thoughts, or to make sure you couldn't make it any better, right? So all those things for me are... So when we talk about this topic, the impact on AI on marketing, the first thing that comes to mind is that there are a lot of marketers, especially in the 20s and in their early 30s, who I think are really at risk of getting disintermediated faster than anybody else if they don't really, really embrace this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right? It's not that, what's the saying, AI won't take your job, but somebody who knows AI will. That is very much at play, especially in the kind of realm that you're talking about. What's interesting, especially with you, is that even before AI, you have been one of the better people that I've ever seen at productizing yourself, and all of the efficiency hacks and templates and everything that you use to make yourself as effective as possible should be followed by many other marketers, but often isn't. And I think this is kind of an extension of that almost, right? Like you have jumped on the AI bandwagon and use it, as you said, for almost everything, right? To make yourself more efficient, to make yourself smarter. But you are probably on the left side of the audience maturity curve, right? Versus, many others who are a little bit more laggard. I feel like a lot of the people that you're describing they've gotten to where they are because they've been able to brute force their way through a little bit. They've pre-ChatGPT and pre-AI, right? The way to learn something was to just go into the trenches and get your hands dirty and do it, basically, right? Aside from courses and Googling and all that stuff, right? But that was really the way that you got deep knowledge. And so I feel like there still is a lagging sentiment among that group where this is the way that has worked, and so I'm going to keep doing that. But the risk, to your point, right, is that if they don't harness this capability the right way, they're going to miss the boat in terms of what they can do, and they will quickly be in danger, I guess, of being replaced or something like that if they can't kind of get on board and utilize it to their advantage.
Yeah, I think it's like tools were, of course, one of the most important things that sets humans apart from the animal kingdom, right? Whether it's iron tools in the Stone Age or things like the wheelbarrow, right? Or now, of course, software and computers and AI, right? And the last thing you want is to consider these things a threat, right? And then because they maybe not embrace them. Yeah, it's magical. I use it probably at least an hour per day and sometimes more, like throughout every meeting, throughout every call. And we can go through a couple of examples, Brian, but let's think about a writer, right, in the marketing team. Writing should not be anybody's job anymore, copywriting. It is a complete waste of someone's brain, right? Become a creative director, do the creative part, do the organizational part, right? Challenge the writing that the AI does for you, because it is so good at also understanding what has already been written, right? And then you can use that to help it create something new, right? That where you don't focus on the actual structure or the writing, but you focus on the ideas, you focus on the questions that are out there that have not been answered yet, right? And now it needs you to help answer those questions, right? Synthesizing, right? Synthesizing things that are multidisciplinary, right? If you think of topics that cross certain areas of expertise, there's nobody better than a human brain to connect what an AI can do really well, like figuring out, hey, what is really good from an automation perspective in this specific area? What is very good from a content perspective in this area? What is very good from a strategic perspective in this area? And then a human is really good at combining those in the way that is most useful for whatever you're trying to do. So I think understanding how to use these tools, I recommend everybody and not just in a certain age group, but everybody who's in marketing to spend multiple hours a day actually to play around with these things and use it to every question that you could ask to a human being who's working with you or for you, right? Assume this is free labor that you have at your disposal. Ask it to the AI, right? And especially these newer algorithms. I don't know if you've played around with the new O1 algorithm that came after 4.0. It's better at reasoning, etc. It is really amazing. Like I have a tendency to ask my ChatGPT bots. I have a bunch of custom chats that I've built. I ask them certain questions over and over, and it knows now, right? So it always kind of It doesn't even ask me anymore. It knows that I like to put things into spreadsheets that are in Excel format, right? So whenever I have questions that need to be structured as a table, it will immediately create the Excel for me. It knows that I like that. So it's very sorry, I'm going to pitch this ChatGPT a little, so maybe you get some revenue from them for referral links.
Sponsorship done.
But yeah, spending $30-$40 a month for this to be one of your tools that you use, it's so worth it for every marketer, Brian.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting, I guess, category, right, which is content creation. And I think for somebody like you who is, or even me, right, who you could say that you're an expert in marketing, right? This is such an efficiency hack. I kind of look at AI, especially for marketing, as I used to say intern, and maybe it's leveled up to an assistant now, right? But it basically can go do your bidding, but you just can't expect it to be a thought leader in the industry, right? It'll give you what's out there. It's really good at doing research. It's really good at synthesizing and summarizing. And there's huge amounts of efficiency that can be unlocked because of that. But one of the mistakes that I've seen more junior people use, who to their credit, right, are using AI, is that they'll put the prompt in, they'll take the results out, and that's what they're going to use, right? Which is not the way to do it. It doesn't actually add value to the conversation. It doesn't take into account, the perspectives of their customers or anything like that, right? And it ends up just putting really vanilla, generic content out. And that, I think, is the biggest mistakes that can be made while using AI. But I guess from your perspective, I'd be really interested to hear what, as either a junior marketer or an executive who doesn't know as much about marketing, right? How would you recommend utilizing ChatGPT to point you in the right direction to where you can add value to the conversation, right? Or can research the right things so that you can put together a piece of content that's really good instead of just vanilla, generic things that won't move the needle.
What I found very useful, and of course here it helps when you have some experience managing other people, right, Brian? But to almost treat ChatGPT like a team member who works with me or for me, right? And the easy thing is you don't have to be nice to it, or you don't have to use like, oh, please do this. Please. You can be relatively transactional in your feedback and what you need. But other than that, it's very similar, right? If I don't think an answer I think it's vanilla, I can say so, right? Hey, this is pretty vanilla, Can you explore a little bit more of this? Have you thought about that? Can you challenge yourself a little bit and think a little bit more out of the box? Can you get creative here? Or if I think it's too creative, I can tell it, hey, this feels a little bit, like of your rocker here, what is this factual? Did you do some checking here? And it can actually do some of that for you, right? So I would kind of learn how to have these conversations with it as if you're talking with a team member.
And especially, right, the amount of time that you can spend with it up front to refine your prompting, right, and learn how to give feedback and refine its output as much as possible will pay dividends in the future, right? Just taking the first output as the best that it will do, right, you'll just end up wasting so much time having to rewrite it yourself versus being able to play with, the prompts and go back and forth with the model to put out the best outcome. What do you think are the biggest limitations to AI so far in your experience, right? I mean, we talked about vanilla content, but is there anything else that you think is just worth knowing, I guess, for people who haven't dove in as much as you have?
You got to realize that the only thing the AI knows is what it can find online or what you've told it, right? And that's also when things are vanilla, you're kind of looking at what the AI can find online, right? And sometimes that's a good thing because now you know where to add value, right? Now you know exactly how you can make it less vanilla, right? And so that's where the magic can happen. And it is really powerful that when you push it a little bit, you know for sure that maybe there's nothing else out there that has already been written. So because the first job you have is to be relevant, right? To do something that hasn't been done before, ideally, or do it better, or do it with more focus on a certain audience, with a new perspective, with a new opinion, right? So using it to challenge yourself in that sense as well, I think is really powerful. And then make sure that when you get the output, the formatting of these answers is usually pretty similar, so think about how do I make this really my own, right? Don't just copy paste things. And that again, it's really about, do you want to be relevant yourself? Or are you okay with whoever is the consumer of your work to think at some point that they don't need you anymore, right? So if you don't want that to happen, then you have to make sure you make whatever you get from the AI a little bit better. Ideally, much better.
I think what's interesting about AI is that it will add a ton of noise to the market, right? If we're thinking about marketing, in terms of the amount of content produced, right? It's going to skyrocket, and we've already seen that. But the value of that content will not necessarily. And so what's interesting to me is that AI is almost, if you want to be successful with it, right? It almost forces you to become very educated in your segment, right? To know your industry better than anyone, to be really well read, really well researched, know the trends, know the history. If you can do that and you can apply it to AI, I think there's no ceiling, right? But if you don't want to be proactive and to, especially as somebody who isn't already an expert in the field, right? To make yourself an expert in the field, it will just be really hard to make yourself stand out. It will be really hard to add value to the conversation, right? And it will be really easy to get stuck and to be, going back to the job quote, right? Somebody else who knows the industry better and knows how to use AI better will come along, right?
I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Brian. You did a great job writing 2 prompts for us today for this podcast recording session. Mm-hmm. How much did you use AI for that?
Learn all my secrets now. Especially for podcasts, actually, I like to use AI as kind of it's like a thought partner or somebody to bounce ideas off of. I think my prompts for this one were, give me 20 thought-provoking questions to ask in a podcast about the impact of marketing on AI. And I looked through those, and what was interesting, actually, to use it to be more specific, the questions were really good, but they were very specific, right? The ChatGPT wanted to go into every single discipline of marketing. And so what about SEO? And what about automation? And that's not exactly where I wanted to take the conversation. So I ended up going back and forth with it a little bit and bringing it back up a level or 2 to get some of these. And then I kind of handpicked the questions that I've been asking you. And then usually from there, I will take over and start to add in my own thoughts in terms of what I think the best answers are, and then go from there. I think I am okay at using it, but I'm still not to the level that I probably could be in terms of refining and multiple iterations with the bot to make it the outcome as great as possible. At a certain point, I say, okay, this is close enough. I'm just going to take it from there, and I probably could be more efficient if I were a little bit more patient.
Yeah, I think. But the one thing I would add to it, I think that's very good. The one thing I would add, you could even use then AI to figure out any of these questions. Like if you would answer this AI yourself based on what you know online, what would the answer be?
And, what would the answer be?
And that was interesting, Brian, is you can sense what is kind of already being entered online. And our listeners can go find other podcasts to hear about that. And there are areas where there's not a great kind of amount of thought on that, right? Where we can really lean in.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, going back to your thoughts on basically like the gap analysis almost of the conversation. That makes a lot of sense. Do you have any predictions on where AI will go, right? We've seen it in the past, 2 years almost, kind of disrupt the status quo quite a bit, but I think it's only really getting started. How do you see it progressing and its impact, right? And either your ability to use it to better your outputs, right? Or the way that it could disrupt a marketing team and be utilized?
I think there's an area of human work that is really hard for it to do, like coaching people. There's an emotional piece of labor to be done and collaboration between team members and all those things. But when it comes to the more transactional, like campaign planning and automation and repetitive work and writing and all of those things, AI will do so much better. So if you're in marketing, you better figure out how you really get good at the strategic stuff. Like how do you do packaging and pricing really well? How do you do positioning really well? How do you talk to customers and turn that into new insights really well? How do you use the AI to do the writing for you, right? In the campaign planning, etc. But I think, marketing automation, copywriting, even like PR management, those type of jobs, I think are hard to sustain.
I agree. I think, getting yourself as close to strategy as possible is the way to go, right? For your security and just your impact on marketing. I think that, granted, I didn't see AI moving into content and strategy as fast as it has. And so maybe I will be surprised in the future, very possible. But I do think that, especially as a marketer, knowing your customer better than anybody else, right, will be very difficult for something like AI or generic, outputs of AI to replace, right? No matter what's on the internet, right, going out and actually talking to customers and prospects and understanding what their pains are, what they want, right, and understanding how to solve those pains with differentiation and your product, right, that's how you put yourself in a strategic place, and that's how you utilize AI to, at that point, you basically become, a VP of marketing with AI underneath you, right? Like, you can do just about anything as long as you know the right strategy to implement it with. So again, along with my soapbox speech on research and getting to know the industry, right? Getting to know your customers more than anybody else, I think is going to give you that lasting edge. Last question that may or may not be relevant. Do you see, there's been a ton of movement, right? I feel like AI is the big buzzword of the last 2 or 3 years and will be for the next, 5. But I also see a bit of a boom in terms of the amount of companies that are coming out and the amount of investments that's being thrown around with anything that has, .ai behind it. Do you see that trend sustaining over time? Do you see it kind of going back down to, an internet boom and bust? How do you see this playing out?
I think with a lot of technologies that came, like in the computer era, they had the computer itself, software doing all kinds of things, internet, of course, now the phone, the mobile devices, IoT. Those were relatively, still not easy to predict, but easier to predict than what AI will do, Brian. I think we've only scratched the surface. And so, yeah, there probably will be some bubble effect. There's always things that are inflated in expectations, and we'll find out what is real and what's not. But I think the potential here is so much bigger than what many people realize, that the bubble could easily go on for a while. And even if some of these get deflated, then there's other bubbles to replace them. There's just so much potential here that I think it's going to be mind-blowing what happens in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's hard to imagine that this ever goes, we go back to a world where we don't really use AI. And even with some of those bubbles and consolidations, right, I think it will be here to stay. Another, the other interesting thing is just OpenAI's dominance in the market, right? The amount of capital that they've acquired and the amount of market share that they've acquired is just staggering, really. And so it does make me wonder, if and what other competitors will actually be able to survive in the long term against it. But I guess that remains to be seen.
Yeah, the real thing for marketing that's going to be hard to predict, but really is meaningful if you can figure this out. The way people consume information is still, I think, sometimes it's very diverse because people have their own preferences, right? Some people like to watch a video, others like to listen to audio. Some people still love to just read, right? And be able to scroll up and down and scan information instead of having to listen to it and not being able to fast forward. How AI, because it's so much better at predicting what someone is looking for and surfacing that up, and will also start determining what those channels are. Right, maybe audio is actually a much better channel than written content if AI is able to summarize it correctly in an audio format, right? Maybe I don't want to listen to a 3-hour podcast recording by Lex Friedman because I just don't have the time, although I love the things he does, right? Or Joe Rogan, or pick your long form podcast format or an audio book
segment. Yeah.
But if an AI does a really good job summarizing the audio in a way that's relevant for me because it knows me, that could completely change. Maybe then I never read a blog again, right?
Never again, yeah. Uh-huh.
So I think what happens to the channels and the way we consume information and the way the information gets filtered by the AI on, a person's behalf because the AI knows what they like, will really change what we as marketers are able to control in kind of where do people hear about us, about what we want to say, about what we want people to believe, right? The job of a marketer comes really down to changing someone's behavior, changing someone's beliefs, right? And if AI is now becoming one of those tools that also on the receiving end of the marketing information, people can take much more command of how they want to receive, how they want to learn, how they want to listen. What does that mean for the marketer, right? How do we, is it just now even more than what's already happened the last 10, 15 years? It's all about relevance, right? Just create content that's really relevant. And the AI filters will make sure people find it and make sure that people consume it in the right. And now you as marketer don't have to worry about whether it's written content or audio, right? The AI will figure it out. Is that going to be important for marketers to know? I don't know. That would be one of the things for me that's super interesting to track.
It does seem like a lot of people are moving towards just searching through ChatGPT, right? Because it has the most specific answers and can surface, exactly the answer to the question that you are asking, aside from instead of Google, right? Which, we all know the issues with SEO. But whether it's because people are searching more through ChatGPT or because the efficiency hacks that have worked for things like SEO and pay-per-click, right, will almost become table stakes that AI can just do for you, right? It'll be really interesting to see what happens with the channels, that everyone has used to date to market to the audience. But I think just going back to, again, how to make yourself the most effective marketer possible, right? It's relevance. How can you add value to the conversation? How can you provide the best answer to the questions that are being asked? And if you can, right, then your material gets surfaced. And if you can't, right, then life becomes very hard for you. So yeah, it will be really interesting to see how this all plays out. And maybe, in a couple of years, we start to get some sort of a bigger window into how AI works and how it selects its materials. But as of now, it's just in my mind, how can you provide the best answer? Okay, easy does it. Thanks as always, Stijn. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you to Adriana Valerio for producing this episode and the Kalungi team for helping us make this whole thing work. And of course, you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, all the links we mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. And if you want to submit or vote on a question you'd like us to answer, you can do that at kalungi.com/podcast. Every time we record, we take one of the top 3 topics and jam on it. Thanks again.